So let's take a look at informal imperialism. Now, with informal imperialism, it's a little bit easier to get concessions and encourage political weaknesses in large societies, very large, complex societies like the Ottoman Empire, like Qing Dynasty in China, rather than trying to attempt direct political control. Now, the Qing Dynasty and the Ottoman family are pretty much losing control over a number of their different ethnic divisions, over a number of their territory. And so the Europe West is at least a little bit savvy enough to understand that they don't have the ability, they don't have the manpower to try and basically push off the reigning family. You're just going to have to sort of try and work with the establishment a little bit. So it's occurring really in formally dominant political empires who have witnessed significant decline. And we're also going to see how this is used a little bit in what's called neocolonialism between the United States, Great Britain, France, and Latin America. Now, both the Ottoman and the Qing empires do try to institute some reforms to keep out a lot of this Western intervention, to not lose political control, but they're generally not entirely effective because they're only putting little pieces of reform here and there. They're not reforming the entire system. So it could be useful to go back and take a look at Russia as they began to industrialize and see, all right, what problems does Russia still have and how does this echo forwards with China and the Ottoman Empire? Now, the Ottoman Empire has a major financial dependency with Europe by importing goods and also getting loans for investments. The Ottoman Empire is very much copying Russia's attempts at industrializing themselves, and this means investing in architecture and railroads and telegraphs, etc., and education and engineering, everything. The idea is that you send your best and brightest to Europe, and they're going to train in European schools and bring ideas back to you. And then they're going to create schools themselves, and then you're going to educate the next generation of Ottomans. And then suddenly, eventually, the Ottoman Empire will be on par again with the West. But the West, of course, doesn't really want to allow this totally because then that means they give up some influence. So there's going to be elements that are definitely changed, but this indebtedness is going to make sure that the West tends to stay in control. There's also the ideas with the limitations of reforms themselves. Um, there's a great deal of protest between different political entities in reference to this European intervention. The Sultan feels that he is losing power. The conservatives, the ulama, the religious clerics, they're not only religious authorities, they're also secular authorities. And they feel that the West is corrupting society, and if more reforms are brought in, that's going to limit their power as well. Because remember, it's that society who's really controlling the Ottoman Empire a little bit more than the Sultan. The Sultans, for the most part, although you still occasionally get one who's capable of learning, who's capable of governing, they really don't have a lot of experience with that. And then you have the liberals. These are the individuals who are initially going to be sent to Europe in order to be educated, and bring this education back to the Ottoman Empire. And while they're in Europe, they also have the ability to study the rest of Western institutions, namely their government. And while they see the Ottoman Empire making slight changes to the government, say the Tanzimat reforms, trying to reform the banking system, the financial system, communications, they also see that there are other reforms not taking place, that the Sultan is actually becoming more absolute, as opposed to trying to introduce a lot of the reforms from the Enlightenment, say a more constitutional monarchy. And so the liberals are saying, no, we even need more reforms than this. So you have groups like the Young Turks who are criticizing the absolutism of the Sultan and want to introduce more parliamentary reforms, more education, more direct participation in government, and try and emulate Europe a little bit more closely. There are widespread rebellions through 1907 and 1908 in the Ottoman Empire. They eventually end up producing a constitution, but it's not necessarily one that introduces a more orderly rule. There's definitely a theme of new governments, but again, Ottoman instability is going to remain a key factor, particularly as long as they remain in debt to Europe. And this is very much going to be the theme of the Middle East as they lose more autonomy to Europe. There's going to see growing varieties of Islamic nationalism, Ottomanism, Pan-Turkism, Pan-Arabism, territories within the Ottoman Empire, different ethnic groups. They're going to see these reforms coming in, and they're going to say, all right, we want a part of this too. We don't want to be Ottoman Turks. We don't want to be ruled by Ottoman Turks. We want to be independent Serbs. We want to be independent Bosnians. We want to be independent Arabs, etc. And this is going to filter on through the rest of the Middle East. Now, turning towards the Qing Empire, we've also seen this gradual encroachment of Western powers, very similar to what we saw with the Western opening of Tokugawa Japan. And part of this encroachment is taking the form of the opium trade. Now, the opium trade basically began because the only good that the Qing were willing to trade with was silver. And by shipping all the silver back into China and losing it themselves, the Europeans are feeling like, okay, we're not really getting anything back from this. They start thinking, like, what's another good we can try to import? And eventually they figured out that opium, they can send opium. If they basically make the Chinese addicted to this drug, they're continually going to want to buy it. The opium can be grown in India, so you have your colony in India again producing something else for trade. It goes to China, and you sell this opium rather cheaply and get whatever goods you need. Now, the top level of Qing officials realized how bad this was going to be for China. And it was technically outlawed, but it is definitely possible to corrupt certain officials. And along with the greater disconnect of the population, the Opium War between Britain and China is really going to be a major success for Britain. China, because they have refused to import new technology, because they have tried to exclude themselves so much from world affairs, means that they really are no longer a match for the Western powers. They've fallen a great deal in terms of prestige. And so they're forced to accept unequal treaties. And these are trade treaties which Britain is first going to introduce, and other European countries are going to jump in along with Japan and the United States. And these treaties are going to benefit the Western powers far more in trade than China. The idea of seclusion as reducing the threats to empire, even though this has just been proved that it's not effective with the Opium War, it's still very much the mindset between a lot of conservative Qings and the eunuchs. The Ottoman Japanese have really indicated that reforms to society have to be necessary if you're going to try and keep any autonomy. But it's not part of the upper levels mindset.